War once again looms on the horizon. A tidal wave of crises now ripples across 3 continents. Each flashpoint simmers like a volcano ready to erupt. In just 72 hours, from Kashmir to the Bay of Bengal, events have stunned the world. Fighter jets falling from the sky, missiles lighting up the night, hospitals overwhelmed, naval forces engaging, dogfights erupting between Chinese and Western aircraft. It's all happening in a place no one expected, South Asia. Tensions between India and Pakistan have crossed a red line. 2 nuclear-armed nations now find themselves on the brink of direct confrontation. Driven by past grudges and brazen fury, the question now, can South Asia become the next fracture point of the global order? And who, if anyone, can prevent catastrophe before it's too late? Meanwhile, the Middle East descends further into darkness. Yet Israel pushes forward its military campaign, planning the conquest of Gaza and potentially Beirut. Iran and the Houthis have made it clear the US and Israel are firmly in their crosshairs. What's still a secret deal between Washington and militant forces is being described by analysts as a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode and send the region into seismic chaos. On the global chessboard, Russia is making calculated yet bold moves. Ukraine stands at a decisive fork in the road, possibly preparing to break away from the United States entirely. And China, the Middle Kingdom, is quietly constructing a massive underground military city, one that could potentially swallow the Pentagon and emerge as an assailable stronghold challenging US dominance. Amid the chaos, artificial intelligence has resurrected the voice of Winston Churchill, reviving wartime speeches as a digital warning, echoing towards a potential Third World War. Hello, and you're watching The Week in the World. While the world is still reeling from geopolitical shocks across the Middle East and Eastern Europe, South Asia has erupted in flames. This week's fierce clashes between Pakistan and India, 2 bitter arch-rivals, have plunged the region into its most serious military crisis in decades. In a world already stretched thin by conflicts, energy shortages, and fragile alliances, this could be the spark that triggers an uncontrollable chain reaction. After
ये नुकसान ये 9 number.
The situation continuing to escalate, authorities in Pakistan's Punjab province have declared a state of emergency across all hospitals amid fears that the conflict could spiral further. According to Dawn News, the province's Deputy Secretary of Health confirmed that half of all hospital beds have been allocated exclusively for emergency cases. Medical facilities have been ordered to remain on full alert 24 hours a day, prepared to respond to worst-case scenarios at a moment's notice.
The report states that non-essential surgeries have been suspended, and hospitals must ensure adequate blood supplies for all blood types. Security forces have also been placed on high alert across the region, as Punjab braces for the potential impact of a full-scale conflict.
The skies remain ablaze as air battles and ground clashes intensify. Despite being perceived as the underdog, Pakistan has inflicted significant losses on India, thanks largely to Chinese-supplied weapons. According to Reuters on May 8, Pakistan deployed Chinese J-10 fighter jets to shoot down at least 2 Indian warplanes, including 1 French-made Rafale. U.S. officials were quick to clarify that no American-made F-16s were involved in the operation.
India has yet to confirm these losses. New Delhi has only acknowledged conducting successful airstrikes on what it termed extremist targets inside Pakistan, without commenting on any downed aircraft. This marks the first Western confirmation of Pakistan using the Chinese-built J-10 in live combat. There had been earlier reports that India may have lost up to 3 fighter jets in recent confrontations.
This confrontation is clearly no longer just a bilateral conflict. It has evolved into a high-stakes battlefield between Chinese and Western weaponry. Military sources suggest Pakistan gained a critical edge by deploying PL-15 long-range air-to-air missiles developed by China. Indian officials claim to have recovered fragments of a PL-15 missile in Punjab's Hoshiarpur district. Although media coverage of the debris has drawn significant attention, the missile's origin and the circumstances of its crash are still under investigation.
May 9th, Avia Pro reported that Pakistan's deployment of such advanced Chinese weapons signals a deepening military technical partnership between Islamabad and Beijing. It also reshapes the regional balance of power, where India's Rafale fighters, armed with Meteor missiles, were previously considered dominant. The PL-15 is a next-generation, beyond-visual-range (BVR) missile. The standard version boasts a range of 200 to 300 kilometers, while the export model PL-15E is limited to 145 kilometers. It features a dual-pulse solid-fuel engine, achieves speeds exceeding Mach 5, and uses AESA radar to guide and correct its trajectory mid-flight. According to Minval.az, analysis of the debris suggests that Pakistan may have used a domestically modified version of the PL-15, potentially with a range greater than the 180 to 200 kilometer reach of the Meteor missiles fitted on India's Rafales. Islamabad has also officially confirmed the integration of PL-10 missiles onto its JF-17C and J-10C Block 3 fighters, a major milestone in Pakistan's ongoing Air Force modernization program.
Naval warfare has now broken out. The Indian Navy has launched a series of precision strikes against key targets inside Pakistani territory in retaliation for Islamabad's alleged missile and drone attacks on Indian soil.
According to NDTV, the operation was carried out on the night of May 8th in the Arabian Sea, targeting strategic sites located within Pakistan. Previously, Islamabad had been accused of attempting missile strikes in the regions of Jammu and Kashmir, as well as conducting UAV incursions into several Indian locations, including the city of Jaisalmer in Rajasthan. In response, Indian air defense systems successfully intercepted all 8 Pakistani missiles, destroying them completely.
One notable development is that India appears to have anticipated the possibility of widespread conflict. Before the recent escalation, the Indian Civil Defense Directorate launched a nationwide emergency preparedness exercise carried out at 259 locations across the country. The objective of the drill was not only to simulate emergency scenarios, but also to test the nation's readiness for the worst-case situations. Air raid sirens, prolonged blackouts, and civil response measures in the event of war or large-scale extremist attacks.
Significantly, the government urged the public to prepare emergency kits with torches, candles, and cash, basic essentials in a crisis. According to India Today, the exercise focused primarily on training for first response actions during simulated air raid alerts and power outages. The drills come as tensions between India and Pakistan continue to rise following the Pahalgam terrorist attack on April 22nd, which killed 26 people. This marks the first national security exercise of its kind since 1971, underscoring the gravity of the current national security threat.
As tensions between India and Pakistan spiral out of control, the spectre of nuclear war looms ominously over South Asia. With nearly 200 nuclear warheads each, both nations are rapidly expanding their arsenals, pushing the threat of global destruction to unprecedented levels. India, once firmly committed to a no first use policy, now appears to be quietly walking away from that pledge. The shift, subtle but deeply alarming, opens the door to a potential full-scale nuclear conflict. Previous commitments have been reduced to hollow promises as the arms race accelerates and international tensions reach a boiling point.
Pakistan, on the other hand, has never bound itself to any such policy. It continues to reserve the right to launch a preemptive nuclear strike, a stance it maintains as a strategic warning to the world. With steely resolve, Islamabad insists it will not hesitate to respond with nuclear force, no matter the consequences. But could these starkly different nuclear doctrines be the deciding factor that pushes the region toward irreversible catastrophe? According to the Arms Control Association, India currently possesses approximately 172 nuclear warheads, while Pakistan holds around 170. However, India enjoys clear advantages in missile range and strategic deterrence. Its Agni-5 missile, with a reach of up to 8,000 kilometers, gives New Delhi the ability to strike deep into enemy territory. In contrast, Pakistan's Shaheen-3 missile has a range of 2,750 kilometers, but it offsets this limitation with a robust tactical nuclear strategy. Of particular note is the Nazar HUF-9 missile, Pakistan's short-range system with a reach of just 70 kilometers, designed for battlefield use and capable of tipping the scales in close-range confrontations.
What's even more striking is India's overwhelming superiority in conventional military power. The Indian armed forces boast a total of 1.24 million active personnel, including 149,000 in the Air Force and 75,500 in the Navy. Pakistan, by contrast, fields a more modest 560,000 troops, with 70,000 in the Air Force and just 30,000 in the Navy. India also maintains a formidable Coast Guard force of 13,350 personnel, further strengthening its maritime defenses amid rising regional instability. However, according to General Roman Poko, a military expert and former commander of Poland's elite Ground Special Forces, the current escalation between India and Pakistan is being contained precisely because of their nuclear arsenals. In an interview with Polish Radio 24, General Poko compared the situation in South Asia to the Russia-Ukraine war, stating that weapons of mass destruction are forcing both sides to exercise extreme caution.
On May 7th, India launched airstrikes on 9 targets in Pakistani territory, including areas of Kashmir under Pakistani control. In retaliation, Pakistan reportedly initiated military operations, targeting Indian installations and shooting down several fighter jets. This marks the most serious escalation between the two nuclear-armed neighbors in over 50 years. Though the conflict is geographically distant from Ukraine, General Pulko warned that its impact on Kyiv could be swift and severe. He noted, "If you look at the power dynamics, the gap between India and Pakistan is striking. In fact, I'd compare India's position over Pakistan to that of Russia over Ukraine, with one key difference. Pakistan, unlike Ukraine, has nuclear weapons. Had Ukraine possessed nuclear deterrence, Russia might never have launched the invasion." He continued, "Pakistan's nuclear arsenal balances out India's overwhelming conventional superiority. India has a defense budget nearly 8 times larger and a military force 3 times the size of Pakistan's. But in this scenario, size and budget no longer determine outcomes."
General Polko explained that the conflict is fueled by two primary factors: the long-standing territorial dispute over Kashmir and Pakistan's support for extremist armed groups. He emphasized, "This is a decades-long conflict that flares up intermittently. The current situation fits within that historical pattern. This is not a total war. India's actions are meant to send a clear signal. It will not tolerate extremist operations emanating from Pakistani territory, but is also not seeking to escalate into full-scale war." The violent escalation between India and Pakistan has clearly become a matter of urgent international concern, putting pressure on the world's major powers, especially the United States, to step in and prevent a full-scale war. But with the conflict centered on Kashmir, a Muslim-majority region, this crisis has also emerged as a defining test of President Trump's leadership, or lack thereof, on the global stage. The world is watching to see whether Washington can still rally international diplomacy or whether it has retreated from its traditional leadership role.
According to CNN, President Donald Trump offered only a measured response to the initial outbreak of violence, which began with an attack on Indian tourists, an incident New Delhi blamed on Pakistani militants. Trump called it a shame and expressed hope that the conflict would end soon. The next day, he issued a lukewarm appeal for peace, saying, "I get along with both sides. I know them well. I want them to work it out. I hope they stop. If I can help, I'm ready." The U.S. State Department later confirmed that Secretary of State Marco Rubio had spoken with top officials from both India and Pakistan in recent weeks, particularly after India launched deep strikes into Pakistani territory on May 6. Yet so far, there's no sign of a broader American diplomatic initiative to defuse the crisis.
One reason may be that the moment isn't ripe for diplomacy, with both nations appearing willing to escalate. Islamabad claims to have downed 5 Indian aircraft to defend national honor and has vowed further strikes on Indian military targets. In this climate, Trump's response is being closely scrutinized, especially as his second administration has weakened America's traditional foreign policy doctrine, leaving behind a leadership vacuum that Washington once filled.
More strikingly, Trump shows little interest in coalition building or activating international partnerships. Instead, his approach hinges on leveraging economic and military power to bend smaller nations to U.S. interests. In Trump's worldview, victory matters more than alliances, and the line between friend and foe often blurs. So it's hardly surprising that a president who once floated expanding American influence into Greenland, Canada, or Panama would shy away from a complex territorial dispute like Kashmir. Although Trump has proclaimed peace as a top priority, his efforts to de-escalate global conflicts, from Ukraine to Gaza, have yielded few concrete results. Even his pledge to halt Houthi attacks on commercial ships following U.S. airstrikes remains unverified. Trump's diplomatic missions, led by envoy Steve Witkoff, have often entangled financial interests. In Ukraine, the Trump administration pressured for a deal to exploit rare earth mineral deposits. In Gaza, Trump once proposed relocating Palestinians to build a so-called Middle Eastern Riviera, a move widely condemned as ethnic cleansing. In contrast, Kashmir offers no clear financial incentive and therefore no appeal.
Historically, American peace efforts from the Camp David Accords under President Jimmy Carter to ending the Balkan Wars under President Bill Clinton required long-term planning and multi-layered diplomacy. But over the past 3 months, there has been no indication of any strategic vision from Trump, let alone a plan for South Asia's emerging crisis.
According to Tim Willesee of the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, the U.S. previously played a key mediating role in Kashmir conflicts. But under Trump, that role has faded. The former diplomat notes that Trump doesn't want to be the world's policeman and likely favors Indian Prime Minister Modi, a staunch nationalist, over Pakistan. Kashmir, situated in the northwestern part of the Indian subcontinent, borders Afghanistan, China, India, and Pakistan. Both India and Pakistan claim the entire region, but each controls only a portion, divided by the heavily militarized Line of Control, LOC. China also holds about 1/3 of the territory.
Beyond Trump's reluctance to lead as past presidents have, today's world, more fractured and unstable than ever, has rendered traditional diplomacy less effective. During the 1999 Kargil War, when Pakistani soldiers occupied Indian territory, Washington strongly backed India. Since then, the successive U.S. administrations have largely followed that trajectory.
Trump, however, maintains close personal and political ties to Modi, further entrenching this stance. The brutal attack on unarmed tourists in Kashmir has generated global sympathy for India's right to self-defense, though New Delhi's crackdown on Muslims in the region remains a source of international concern. Meanwhile, America's influence over Pakistan has diminished, especially after the end of their alliance in the war on extremism and the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Pakistan has since deepened its long-standing strategic ties with China, giving both India and Pakistan powerful allies. Milan Vaishnav, director of the South Asia program at the Carnegie Endowment, observed, "India is now America's most important strategic partner in the region, while Pakistan has lost its centrality. The U.S. hopes Pakistan will respond prudently, allowing both sides to save face and find a way out of this prolonged standoff."
Meanwhile, Qatar has taken on the role of mediator in ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas, but it has condemned India's actions in Kashmir. Along with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, the Qatari government may still have leverage over Pakistan, especially given the country's worsening economic crisis. However, unless the situation spirals out entirely out of control, Washington is unlikely to lead this crisis response, with American diplomacy increasingly absent from the global stage. In every measurable way, Pakistan now stands on the edge of a critical ammunition disaster, to the point that its capacity to sustain a full-scale conflict may be limited to just 4 days. This shocking revelation was reported by the Indian Express, citing reliable military sources. The surprising cause: since 2022, Islamabad has secretly been supplying weapons to Ukraine, rapidly depleting its own strategic ammunition reserves.
Pakistan's arms exports skyrocketed from $13 million in 2022 to $415 million in fiscal year 2023, an astonishing 3,000% increase. Among the shipments were large quantities of 155mm artillery shells, which have severely drained Pakistan's own stockpiles. As a result, the Pakistani military is now critically understocked in munitions for key platforms like the M109 howitzer and the BM21 rocket launcher. One senior military analyst, speaking on condition of anonymity, noted, "Pakistan sent its ammunition to faraway wars, but now it faces a brutal truth: depleted stockpiles and a dangerously fragile defense posture."
The Pakistan Onions Factories, the country's primary military production facility, is now under immense pressure to replenish dwindling reserves. Yet with aging infrastructure and soaring global demand, the facility has struggled to keep up. This has triggered panic within Pakistan's military leadership.
According to the Economic Times, on May 2nd, a crisis meeting was held with senior Army Corps commanders, where officials explicitly warned of an alarming shortage of 155mm artillery shells, a linchpin in Islamabad's armored and artillery strategy. Former Chief of Army Staff, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, has also warned that Pakistan lacks both the ammunition and the financial capacity to sustain a prolonged war with India. Social media posts dating back to April further confirm that a substantial volume of artillery rounds was indeed shipped to Ukraine, leaving Pakistan's own reserves in crisis. Even attempts to establish new ammunition depots near the Indian border have proven ineffective. There simply isn't enough stockpile, nor enough secure storage space to reverse the situation in time.
And you're still watching This Week in the World. The conflict in Middle East war zone shows no sign of easing. This week, Israel approved a large-scale military operation targeting Gaza, despite warnings from its own military leadership that such a plan could endanger the hostages still held in the enclave. The strategy aimed at conquering Gaza and maintaining territorial control has reportedly been greenlit by Israel's top leadership, according to a senior Israeli official speaking on the morning of May 5th.
As reported by the Times of Israel, the Israeli Security Cabinet has formally approved plans to expand its offensive in Gaza. However, implementation of the operation will be delayed until after President Donald Trump's upcoming visit to the region next week. In the interim, Israel will focus on pursuing a ceasefire and attempting to secure a hostage agreement with Hamas, according to Hebrew-language media reports. The plan, formulated by IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, outlines a clear goal: seize control of Gaza and retain key territory under Israeli military occupation. The strategy also includes moving civilians southward, targeting Hamas strongholds, and cutting the group off from humanitarian aid supplies.
According to Israel's public broadcaster, Kan, the operation will unfold in stages, starting in an undisclosed area of Gaza before gradually expanding. Officials expect fighting to continue for several months. In addition, Israel's sources confirmed the cabinet also approved a reform of humanitarian aid mechanisms meant to prevent Hamas from exploiting relief supplies for military purposes. The policy will include extending aid deliveries under stricter oversight. However, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir was the only member to vote against the plan, arguing that any implementation must remain contingent on the real-time security situation inside Gaza. And in a significant show of force, Iran has officially unveiled a new solid-fuel ballistic missile named Qasem-Basir, with a range of 1,200 kilometers and high maneuverability. The move is widely seen as an effort to bolster Iran's strategic deterrence against regional rivals and Western adversaries. According to Mehr News Agency, the announcement was made during a live interview on Iran's state-run Erupt 2 channel, where Defense Minister General Azir Nazizadeh emphasized that the new missiles offers superior maneuverability compared to its predecessors and is designed to evade advanced air defense systems such as the U.S. Ta'ad and Patriot, as well as Israel's missile shield.
A video aired during the broadcast showed a successful test launch on April 17, in which the Qasem-Basir struck its target with remarkable accuracy. The missile reportedly incorporates key upgrades based on combat experience from Iran's past retaliatory strikes against Israel, namely the True Promise 1 and True Promise 2 operations. In the interview, General Nazirzadeh issued a direct warning to Washington, declaring that if Iran is attacked or dragged into a conflict, it will respond with unrestrained and uncompromising force. He stated, "We will strike U.S. interests and bases without hesitation." While asserting that Iran does not consider its neighbors enemies, the defense chief made it clear that U.S. military installations on foreign soil, including those in Iraq, Qatar, the UAE, and Bahrain, would become legitimate targets if Iran is threatened, signaling significant risk for America's regional allies.
The unveiling of the Qasem-Basir underscores two concurrent trends in Iranian military strategy: enhanced asymmetric deterrence and technical confidence in missile development. Iran is increasingly focused on solid fuel missile technology, which allows for faster launch preparation, easier concealment, and greater mobility compared to traditional liquid-fueled systems.
With a 1,200-kilometer range, the Qassem Basir can easily reach all of Israel and key U.S. military bases across the Middle East. If its reported immunity to THAAD and Patriot defenses proves accurate, it could pose a serious challenge to U.S. and allied defense postures in the region.
Backed strongly by the United States, Israel is ramping up pressure on Iran, demanding that Tehran immediately dismantle Hezbollah's military infrastructure in Lebanon. The message from Jerusalem is crystal clear. If Iran does not comply, Israel is prepared to launch a full-scale military assault on Lebanon, with the occupation of Beirut no longer off the table.
But this is no ordinary warning. According to sources from Natsiv.net, senior U.S. officials have confirmed that this is a high-priority demand emphasized by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in recent high-level negotiations. This issue goes beyond regional security. It has become a critical component in the ongoing nuclear negotiations between Washington and Tehran. These sensitive talks, held weekly in Muscat, Oman, have turned into a high-stakes battleground, with the U.S. reportedly prepared to back Israel militarily if Iran fails to act. The escalation marks a potential turning point in the Middle East conflict, one that could usher in a new and dangerous chapter with far-reaching consequences for the entire region.
In a dramatic escalation, Yemen's Houthi rebels have released a provocative video this week that has sent shockwaves through the international community. The video highlights 3 strategic Israeli airports, clearly marked on a map, with a bold warning as unsafe airports.
The footage, published on the Houthis' Telegram channel, is a piece of psychological warfare laced with direct threats against Israel. Accompanied by the ominous sound of a ticking clock, the video builds a sense of impending danger, implying that time is running out before an attack. According to the Jerusalem Post, the messaging is designed to instill fear and signal potential strikes on Israeli infrastructure, even as conflict in Yemen continues. Analysts view it as a strategic warning, not just to Israel, but to the region, amplifying the already volatile atmosphere across the Middle East.
The Houthi rebels are reportedly using the ceasefire deal with the United States as a propaganda tool, declaring it a strategic victory while explicitly excluding Israel from the scope of the agreement. This loophole has allowed the Iran-backed militant group to continue targeting Israel-linked vessels in the Red Sea, a central element of their military campaign since the fall of 2023.
Despite agreeing to halt attacks on American ships, a senior Houthi official told AFP that Israel is not covered under the newly reached ceasefire. In an interview, Abdul Malik Al-Ijri, a member of the Houthi Political Bureau, stated, "Maritime routes will be safe for all international vessels, except those belonging to Israel. The agreement does not include Israel. It applies only to the U.S. and other countries." Al-Ijri clarified that for now, the Houthis are targeting only Israeli-linked ships, marking a tactical shift from their previous broader engagement. Any vessel that originates from, is bound for, or is owned by Israel remains a potential target.
On May 7, Houthi military spokesperson Yahi Sari confirmed the group has carried out 2 drone attacks, one on Ramon Airport in southern Israel and another on a high-value target near Tel Aviv using UAV dubbed Yafa.
Global reactions to the ceasefire remain divided. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Bakai hailed the truce as a legendary act of resistance by the Yemeni people and welcomed the U.S. decision to cease airstrikes. Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry expressed its support for the agreement, while the United Nations urged all parties to exercise restraint and reduce tensions in and around Yemen. However, analysts are raising red flags. The Houthis' continued attacks on Israeli assets could ignite a new cycle of violence, undermining the fragile progress made. Though praised as a breakthrough, the current ceasefire remains a temporary measure, a fragile step on a long and perilous road toward true regional stability.
And that concludes today's program. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and we'll see you again in our upcoming broadcasts.